name's Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the director of the clinic. In today's video, what I'll be looking at is a question of timing. Many people ask about why there is a word of disorder in dissociative identity disorder and other specified dissociative disorders, why we think of these things as disorders at all, if we're saying that actually they have the hugely protective component against complex trauma. The answer for me lies in the timing of dissociation. In that it's not that the dissociation event is disordered, it's that the timing of that is disordered. What I mean by this is that any time dissociation happens, so this could be a switch of alters, it could be a loss of consciousness, it could be a loss of memory, it could be a depersonalization, it could be a removal of the self from the body or from the space around it, such as in derealization. It's that that's often triggered by an event happening in the present that was largely set up in the design of dissociation from the past. When we think of dissociation being the consequence of often childhood trauma, what that means is that the brain started putting together the pieces of the dissociation a long time ago in that person's past. So therefore, the childhood brain undergoing trauma at the time developed a sequence of events known as dissociation within which to try and protect or preserve the self, the body, the mind from whatever traumatic events were taking place at that time. Now that design then remains rooted in one type of function that is then repeated later on through that person's life over and over again as trigger events. So therefore the dissociation is designed to childhood and then plays itself out in adulthood. So this is what we see often when we have child parts. So the child part was grown or created or developed, if you like, at that point of complex trauma in the person's childhood, and then when they become an adult later in life, it's triggered into being through whatever sequence of events are happening in that present day. So the disorder then is that what takes place in the present often doesn't make a great deal of sense because it was designed to be working in the past. This makes it really difficult for people because they're trying to understand what on earth is going on in the present when the events and the dissociation don't really seem to match. So a person could be walking down the street, something could happen and they dissociate. And that dissociative event could be really quite all-consuming and quite powerful, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because the person actually wasn't in any danger. But if we think about the danger that might have been present for the person in the past, that could have been extremely dangerous, could have been a life-threatening event or the perception of life-threatening events in the childhood brain, that is very powerful. And yet when the person is in their adult life and the danger has passed, that is, they're no longer in the same situation as they were in childhood, that the present is often much safer, but that the power of that dissociation remains the same as it was, as if the person's life was in danger, as it might have been in the past. So we see a raw nature of dissociation taking place, and that's often when a switch happens. For example, in dissociative identity disorder, it can be very powerful and it can take the person over and it can have a hugely difficult effect in the present because it is a response to life-threatening trauma when there is no life-threatening trauma. In the short term then, what we try and develop in clinical practice is that understanding that we don't really have to understand what the trauma actually was that created that dissociation. All we need to do is have a sense that that dissociation does make sense. There is a logic to it, even if we don't really have to understand exactly what that might be at the time. And this is very important for people who are often not in therapy because realistically, to try and understand the piece by piece, the sort of like the development of that sort of jigsaw, if you like, of why all the dissociation is happening according to the trauma, often means you need to be in trauma therapy, and for a lot of people that is simply not available. And to try and go into that without all the right protections of the guidelines of the clinical practice, the therapeutic space, the pace, the containment of the therapist, without all of those things, it's really not great to try and go back into that trauma and work it out for themselves. That often goes very, very badly for people, and they become very, very distressed indeed. What we try and do instead is have an empathic understanding that whatever dissociation is taking place, even if it makes absolutely no sense in the here and now, it probably does make sense in the context of the past. And to develop that understanding and to develop that empathy begins the process of reducing the intensity or the likelihood, such as the frequency, of that dissociation taking place in the present day. Now, this doesn't answer everyone's questions, and it doesn't remove the dissociation. What it does is it helps the person connect to their dissociation as being purposeful and functional, even without possibly any idea whatsoever about why it is happening in the now. So instead of the person going down the route of saying, why is this happening? I hate it. They say, I don't understand what's going on, but it probably does make sense, and one day I will understand it, and maybe one day I will thank my dissociation for it once I've gained control and mastery over it, which is realistically one of the huge goals of therapy. So to summarize, the disordered component is timing. It's that something in the past is happening in the present, it was developed in the past, and it's being repeated in the present without choice and without that being a decision on the basis of a traumatic trigger in the brain. The brain is tricked into believing there is threat when there probably isn't. I mean, there might be, but let's face it, most dissociation in the present day for adults takes place within safe contexts. So the threat from the past is a trick in the present. The brain might believe there is a threat when there isn't, so it brings on the dissociation that it knows worked from the past. I hope this is something that will be able to be understood by people and be able to be seen as a fairly simple construct as a route towards gaining mastery and gaining control of the dissociation and almost making the dissociation into a choice. In the next video, what I'll be doing is I'll be looking at ways of being able to work alongside the dissociation, hopefully within the context of therapy, so that it's done safely and that it's done with the appropriate kind of measures and things around it which can make that practice of learning how to dissociate correctly much more useful and much more productive to the individual. So I'll put that in as the next video as ways of being able to look towards using this knowledge of timing to begin taking control of the therapy. In the meantime, if you want to access more content from the CTAD Clinic channel, please like and subscribe, and we will put these videos out for you as much as we possibly can do. In the meantime, take great care of yourselves.